Hello everyone, my name is Amal Candido. I'm here today with you and we're going to be talking about the inner critic, my favorite topic of all time. I'm sure it's your favorite topic too. So the inner critic. A lot of us think that the benefit of the inner critic is sometimes it helps us move forward, make decisions, and not just to take an action. So it's supposed to be a good thing that we fall into this inner critic trap, where we are, we need that little verbal nudge to do something about something, or move forward, or take an action. But here's the thing. As much as, yes, to some degree, that does have validity to it, and the inner critic plays a role. It's supposed to protect you, to assess threats and not doing something, a mistake again, and all that stuff. The problem is when you allow it to hijack you completely, it will end up paralyzing you from taking decisions, making some even small, tiny risks, and it'll end up limiting you, and it cause you a lot of more trouble than it's worth. So but as life goes on, most people actually pull back from major parts of their psyche, perhaps because a bunch of sadness and painful emotions are buried deep inside, or took place, or fumes of toxic wishes were alarming, so they kind of just pull back from their psyche completely. By mid-adulthood, we are living in this gated house. We basically create this, we armor up, we shelter ourselves, we hide behind these walls and gates that we build around ourselves, venturing out maybe a little bit, but lacking much sense of the whole state that we have to work with. So when that happens, with the walls and the gates around it, venturing a little bit, and we lose touch of the sense of basically the whole state that we need to work with to understand ourselves and our needs, and how we can move forward and heal. So emotions are shut down. Energetic and erotic well springs of validity are capped, and deep longings are buried and set aside. Subpersonalities are shackled and silent, and old pain and troubles are buried. The roots of reactions, which anger, hurt, the roots of the reactions of the anger and the hurt, feelings of inadequacy, are all veiled, and we can't get at them because they are veiled and masked and buried, and we live at odds with nature and with our own nature. That's pretty much what inner critic, if we allow it to hijack us, would do to us. Sure, the process actually of the psyche needs some regulation, right? When we go that far into allowing the inner critic and other emotional baggage hijack us and take over and limit us, we need some regulations. And not all thoughts should be spoken, and not all desires should be actually acted upon. But if we suppress, recoil, push away, deny major parts of ourselves, then we feel cut off, and we alienate ourselves from vital information. We lack the information that we need to be able to move forward and make the right decision and heal. Mainly heal, because when you are stuffing your emotion with food, or with something is causing you discomfort, you don't want to deal, and you are shoving everything down, and the inner critic is trying to don't do this because last time you did this, and you put yourself out there, and the rejection, the disappointment, and so on. Different scenario, the inner critic pop up and speak to try to protect you. You have to be able to have all the valid information to actually decide whether this requires a decision, a move forward, or something that you need to act upon. When you are lacking these information because you are not dealing, you are not facing the discomfort, what really is going, you lose touch with what's really going inside you. And you're no longer at home in your own skin or your own mind, which feels actually bad, and it lowers effectiveness at home and in the workplace. It fuels interpersonal issues and contribute to health problems. So, the takeaways. Some of the takeaways that really your thoughts are not necessarily true facts. Challenge those negative inner critic and those thoughts. You really have to take a pause and step back and kind of, that soundtrack, that movie, that record that keeps playing every time when it comes up and it tells you not to do something or do something, or basically it pushes you either in a flight, freeze, or fight respond. You gotta try to not be hijacked by it and kind of do that self-inquiry and dig deep, even though it's uncomfortable. Believe it or not, women can calibrate or rate their performance and ability differently to men, often unknowingly and usually more negatively and harshly. I will put my hands up for that one. When your inner critic is in charge, it can adversely actually affect your perception and decision and action. And that's when you want to make sure that, that's when you got to recognize and step back and view it objectively. So, personal insights into that. What do you do about it? You know, from a personal insight journey or self-discovery, if you want to call it, you got to think about what are the triggers. Reflect on what situation and scenario that triggers that inner critic in you. Sometimes it could be when you're most stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or comparing yourself to others, or when you are given a feedback that might have triggered something that happened in the past and kind of just, or even back in your childhood. Whatever the scenario is, these are situations, they will trigger you. You gotta identify what that trigger is and where the root of that trigger come from in order for you to be able to recognize it, manage and deal, and be able to move forward to heal. What soundtrack does your inner critic play? We all have a soundtrack. Think about it. What you hear the most. Each person has few negative theme that plays more often than others. What's yours? Ask yourself, what's yours? Is yours says I'm not good enough? Does it say I don't feel like I feel like an imposter? Does it say I didn't do this well? Oh, I'm such an idiot? What does it say to you? What those trigger? What those negative themes that pop up? So, how can you prevent yourself from being hijacked by your inner critic? There are actually few steps to take to help you manage that inner critic. First, starting by choose a cue to check in with yourself. Choosing a cue, really, its job is to prompt you to pause for a moment and check to see if your thoughts are constructive, because your inner critic is not always saying good stuff to you. And ideally, you need to check in with your thoughts and several times a day, especially in moments when you feel stressed, irritable, or overwhelmed. There are specific cues that puts you in that inner critic stage. These are, some of them are simple as this, as we mentioned, this, the stress and the overwhelmed or tiredness or irritability. It starts that way. And then play the name game. The name game, it helps create a distance and objectivity from your negative thoughts by talking to yourself as if you were someone else. So in that sense, this technique helps because it detaches you from your own thoughts and allow you to step back as almost like you're having an out of body experience. You're watching yourself. You're stepping outside of that emotion, that inner critic, that hijack, and you're watching yourself objectively and not connecting or identifying with that thought or inner critic. It makes it easier to challenge your thoughts because you want to challenge the validity of that thought. Is it true? Is it what you're seeing? Is it true? Is of what that thought is saying? And the other aspect is ask when you think about the past. It's like an inquiry by asking when it doesn't actually something go well that as you hoped. Don't waste time repeatedly criticizing, beating yourself up and saying, oh, I should have done this, and dwelling on, oh, what went wrong. We all do it. I know it's impulsive. It's a thing that we all do and we can't help it. But the learning here and the key is when you catch yourself doing that, falling into the dwelling and criticizing yourself because something didn't turn out the way you wanted, don't live in that the should have and the could have and what should have happened. Move yourself into what have you learned from that experience, because research shows that if you only focus on the regret and self-blame, you are more likely to perform worse in a similar situation in the future. And instead of doing that, create a problem-solving solution, like a problem-solving growth mindset, by asking yourself questions about what other or additional actions that you could have taken to improve the outcome instead of dwelling on it. The other aspect that would help is journal. I know this sounds probably to others, what do you mean? I'm going to sit and journal about my inner critic. That's ridiculous. Oh, trust me, it works. That's something I do on a daily basis, actually. It's one of the techniques that helps me. The journaling is about, it helps you notice how ridiculous your thoughts and the things that you're telling yourself about yourself. How harsh you are, how mean you are. When you are journaling and writing down about a situation that didn't turn well and didn't make you feel good, and you write your thoughts down in a piece of paper, and then when you go back and look at it, you honestly you get to see how mean and awful you are to yourself. And then 9 out of 10 you realize this is not how you would speak if a friend came to you full of hurt and disappointment, and what would you do to that friend? How would you speak to that friend that you care so much, or a family member that you love and you care? Even to your own children, when they make mistakes, you don't tell them you dwell. You want to encourage them. You give them love. You show them that mistakes, trial and errors is what make the person. It gives wisdom and insight, and it builds character and perseverance. If you can step into that and look at it from that lens and able to use that journaling to your benefit, that really does work wonders. The other practice you could do is, which it actually take us into the journal technique, is self-compassion. Practice self-compassion. When you don't practice self-compassion, when you journal your thoughts and you see how mean you are to yourself and how you do that self-blaming and beating yourself up, you add more stress to the situation. You add difficult emotions that are unnecessary, and it won't help you to heal and bounce back. you would not do this. You would show love and compassion to a friend, as I mentioned, than you would to yourself. So can you actually honestly practice self-compassion? Can you extend that practice to yourself? And the last practice, and the technique that is called RAIN. RAIN is an acronym originally created by Michelle McDonald, a senior mindfulness teacher. And to summarize, the powerful way to expand self-awareness. That's really what it is. RAIN is summarizing the way you can expand on your self-awareness. And also, Tara Brach actually developed this approach even further, including in her highly recommended book, Radical Compassion, Learning to Love Yourself and Your World with the Practice of RAIN. And we're gonna actually go into what the RAIN stand for. So the R stands for recognize. And basically notice that you are having an experience or something that is causing irritation and discomfort. And the A, and basically when you are recognizing that, sorry, before I move ahead, take a step back into observation rather than reactivity. And without getting into the story and getting all sucked into it, simply name what is present. And is it an annoyance, a frustration, thoughts of being mistreated? Is your body firing up? Are you feeling hurt? Are you disappointed? Do you want to cry? It's recognizing what's happening, what that irritation look like. The A is accepting or allowing, acknowledging that experience is for what it is. Even if it's unpleasant, be with it actually without attempting to change it. A lot of us, when we are feeling these uncomfortable emotions or being put in situations that it's making us really uncomfortable, and we are having a hard time dealing because we haven't practiced meeting our emotion, letting it pass through us, and then we're coming at the other side. So try to have that self-compassion instead of self-criticism. When you do something wrong, when something doesn't turn out the way you hoped, or you messed up pretty bad, instead of beating yourself up on the self-blame, meet yourself with some compassion. Don't add, as I mentioned, to the difficulty by being hard on yourself. You're accomplishing nothing. You really are accomplishing nothing. The I is for investigate, inquire. Basically, try to find an attitude of interest and curiosity and openness, because sometimes the things that require you to be open might be things that you're uncomfortable with. And if they are things that you're uncomfortable with, you don't want to accept them. You don't want to admit to them. They might be a discovery about yourself that you don't like. But it's not about something that you don't like. It's more about how can you heal? How can you move forward? Because you don't want that inner critic to keep you stuck from everything, from a life of joy or hopes and dreams and desires that you want. Not attaching intellectual analysis but a sense of tenderness or friendliness towards what you found. Open yourself to other aspects of the experience, such as a softer feelings of the hurt under that brittle armor, anger. It's okay for your inquiry to be guided by a bit of a self-insight into your history. Like I mentioned, sometimes when you look at the root cause, in order to move forward and heal, you have to actually step back and investigate what the root cause. Because if you don't meet the root causes, the patterns will keep coming up until you learn to master your own self-regulation and build that internal resources to move forward from setback and challenges and frustration. You will always fall into these scenarios and situations. They become the trigger, and you're gonna have reactivity, or you're gonna recoil or shut down or hide away from facing things and difficult emotion. Inquiry to be guided by a bit of an insight to your own history and personality, but try to stay close to the raw experience and out of psychoanalyzing yourself. The end is not to identify or non-identification to the self, having feelings and thoughts, etc., instead of being it. You can have all those feelings and thoughts, but they don't define you. They don't become you. It's not your brand. Disentangle yourself from the various parts of the experience, knowing that they are small, they are fleeting aspect of the totality of who you are. See a streaming nature of sounds and sights. It actually, and other contents to the causes that have nothing to do with you mainly, or basically that are impersonal. Feel the contraction, because when you're feeling the contraction of the stress and the pain that comes from claiming any part of that stream as I and me or mine, the sense of spaciousness and peace that comes from the experience simply flow. So when you detach yourself and you don't turn the experience into it's something that has become of you going forward, you're gonna feel that sense of spaciousness, the peace that comes from just, okay, that's what happened, I get it, and you move forward, let the experience flow, you learn from it, and you leave it at that. It doesn't become the whole aspect of who you are as a person. In summary, and my final thoughts are this: often it is not enough to simply be with the mind, even if it's in a profound way. And the profound way is basically by using or practicing the rain. Sometimes the rain technique is not everyone can handle it or can practice that. You could when you're ready for it. We need to work with the mind. We have to understand that we need to work with the mind. In order to heal, we need to know what's going on through that mind. And by reducing what's negative and increasing what's positive. It's also necessary to work with the mind to build up the inner resources that I was talking about that needed to be with it. Because in order to know what's happening and connect what's happening in the mind, that narrative, you have to also be able to be with it. And to be with it, you have to build the inner resources to handle it. Can you face some things about yourself that you don't want to face, you don't like? Being with and working with the mind are not, and they should not be at odds with each other, as same way as actually some people think. They both go together. You should not be at odds with the mind, but in fact, it should support each other. Dr. Rick Hanson says that whatever way we work with the garden of our mind, pulling weeds and planting flowers will be more successful later after it rains. So lastly, to wrap this talk up, is sometimes in order to cultivate joy and happiness and peace and calm and live in a state of well-being that we desire, we have to face those parts of ourselves that we suppressed, shoved down, build gates, armor up, and build walls around us in order to move forward. Because if we don't face those, they become the triggers and the emotions and the baggage that we carry everywhere, whether on a personal or professional level. That's what fuels the interpersonal issues, because if we don't have an understanding of who we are and what triggers us and how we can self-regulate and build that internal emotion, we won't be able to bounce back, build resilience, persevere, and find and create and move through life in an effortless way and in a peaceful manner. Thank you so much for joining me today on this video. I hope you find some of the technique helpful. May you find peace, may you live well, and until then, I'll see you next time.